Thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to be talking about Power BI and designing for accessibility. So I'm Serena, and I'm just going to start by doing a little intro about myself and who I am. So I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I've been there for about a year and a half, and I specialize in Power BI. I graduated from the University of Newcastle in biocomputing, and I have dyslexia. And this is what got me interested in accessibility and began to start asking questions about what is accessibility, what does it mean to have accessible design, and what really got me going. And to begin with, so what does it mean to be accessible? So it means having your content and data simple enough that minimal interactions are needed to actually understand the content. And there's a globally recognized standard called the WCAG, which stands for the Web Accessibility Guidelines, which are a recognized standard of what it means to be accessible. And about 1 in 5 people identify as having an accessibility need, which might not seem like a lot. It's probably around 20% of people that are interacting with your reports. But fundamentally, if we make a more accessible design for one person, by default, this is making a more accessible design for everybody interacting with that report. So it's not just a case of we're making it for some people. We, by default, are making it for everybody having a more enjoyable experience of your designs. And as report designers, we have that responsibility to make things accessible and clear. And it's already a law that any public-facing government or local council or anything like that needs to have accessible websites and apps that meet standards similar to the WCAG. And I think this is a really interesting thing to look at because that clearly means that industries are moving towards having accessible designs by law. And so if you're looking at report designs now, it's much better to be proactive in this approach and start building in accessibility now rather than in a few years' time having to look back and retrospectively now start making things accessible and having to change a lot of things already been done. And then also, I believe this is a journey. I don't believe that I'm an accessibility expert, but I believe that I'm trying to learn how I can be accessible, and I'm wanting to ask questions, I'm wanting to understand what does it mean. And I think sometimes it can be a little bit of a scary thing to try and be accessible, because there's a little bit of a fear if I do one thing and not another, I might get called out and I might be not seen to be fully accessible. But I think it really is a learning journey, and we're never going to know until we ask people, what does it mean to be accessible for you? So I think it really is quite a safe space to be brave and kind of go out there and put yourself out there to understand. And next, so I've kind of broken down my presentation into 2 parts. So on the left-hand side, I've got my report developers, and on the right-hand side, I've got my report consumers. And so I'm going to go through this by first looking at designing accessible reports. So what does it mean to have accessible designs? I'm then going to look at creating reports using accessibility tools. I've also got a little report checklist as well to see how accessible you've been with your design. And then on the consumer point of view, how can we use the built-in features in Power BI and use the accessibility features available. And then also the keyboard shortcuts, which, to be honest, are going to be sprinkled a little bit throughout as well, but I'll just go a bit more detail at the end about them. And to begin with, I'm just going to look at designing accessible reports. So to begin with, on the left-hand side, I've got some KPIs, which to begin with probably look like pretty standard KPIs that we're all used to seeing. We can see that it says year-to-date totals. But if you didn't know what the acronym year-to-date meant, that in itself is an accessibility barrier, because those KPIs then won't mean anything to you and you can't take away the key information. So in this example, a much better version of this would have been to call it year-to-date profit GBP totals instead. So anybody who looks at this now can fundamentally get the information out of it, and there is no barrier to understand what's actually being said. I'm next going to move on to a bar chart. And again, it probably looks like a pretty standard bar chart that we're all used to seeing. But if you actually had to get any information out of this chart, you could probably tell me that November has the highest sales, maybe October, maybe January has the lowest. But it's not actually that helpful if you really had to get some proper insight from this. So a much better design would be something more like this. We've got more detailed titles, a more detailed legend. We've got a much better color range in our legend as well. But really importantly, we've used actual data labels. So now you don't have to kind of estimate, I think it's that, I think it's this, because you can accurately say this is this value. And also a really important principle as well is that you should never rely solely on color to convey information. If you can't see the differences in these colors, this report then is already, or this chart already, isn't going to be able to help you very much in terms of what you can see from it. So another point that I'm going to show to prove this, again, is in this line chart. So again, if you couldn't tell the difference between these two colors, that you wouldn't be able to tell anything from it. It would be really pointless to be looking at it. So another way that you can incorporate more accessible design is, is to use data markers. So here, because we've now used shapes to also convey information, there's no requirement to have to just rely on color solely. And then bringing it back to data labels as well, we could include data labels. But I think there's actually a really interesting kind of point here between where does accessibility end and where does design start. So personally, I think at this point, maybe the data labels are a bit distracting. You're actually focusing more on the number rather than the actual visual itself. So personally, I'd probably go more for the first design and keep it just with data markers. But that is that point where you have to look at your report and say, what is it I actually want people to take away from this? And again, just think, is this useful? Is it accessible? Is it actually showing what I want it to be showing? And next, I'm just going to move on to an example of a matrix using alt text. So to begin with, what actually is alt text? Alt text is the way that we describe the appearance of charts and visuals to those using screen readers. And every alt text and description used should be clear enough that if you couldn't even see this chart, you should be able to understand what's being shown. And I think a really fun thing as well is that you can use DAX and certain KPI measures in there as well. So you can have dynamic values in the alt text as well and call out values as they change, which I think was quite a cool thing as well. And also, if you do it at the start as well, it even exports to PowerPoint, sorry. So when you export a visual to PowerPoint, I can kind of see here that my alt text already carried through. So it's almost like if you start doing it from the get-go, it's just going to be easier later on for you because you don't have to look back and redo things. I'm next going to talk about tab order. So setting tab order is for keyboard users, and I'll go into an example of how a keyboard user would navigate a report later on. But you set this in the selection pane, and essentially how someone would interact with your report. And ideally, you'd want it to be in a visual layer order. And so I've actually highlighted here, I thought it was a really interesting feature that Power BI can do, which is have tab order match the visual order. So Power BI can automatically look at your report and say, this is how I imagine a user would be looking at it, and set that for you. And it does it in a hierarchy, so we can see these are all numbered. And at the bottom, I've hidden my home picture, because that isn't something I'd want a keyboard user to be interacting with, because it's not a fundamental part of the report. So that's also best practice there as well, to be removing anything that's not actually an interactable part of the report. Next, I'm going to go on to report themes. So Power BI has recently come out with some accessible themes as well. So these are all compliant to the WCAG standards and comply with 4:5:1 colorblind friendly ratios as well. So again, it's just, even if you're curious, having to play around with it to understand what does it mean to have accessible color design, I think, is a really easy way just to get started with accessibility. And I'm now going to look on creating reports using the accessible tools. So to begin with, I'm actually going to talk about something called key tips, which is when you press Alt Windows. So I've got a little video here of how you actually interact with it. But essentially what it is, it's when keyboard users who don't use a mouse need to create reports, and so they can press on these letters here, and I'm just going to do a demo of how I interact with the ribbon navigation pane. I'm just going to have a look through them. I'm going to look through some of the other visual options there, and then I'm also even going to insert a text box as well, just using my keyboard alone. And this is kind of just wanted to give you guys an idea of what it might be like for someone who doesn't use a mouse and has to solely rely on the keyboard. And it is actually quite interesting as well, because even doing it myself, I found it actually quite quicker sometimes with shortcuts and getting things around as well. So I think there's a lot to be learned anyway, just about how you can make your own design process a little bit easier. And I'm next going to go on to the accessibility color themes, actually in the Windows desktop itself. So what Power BI can do is that when you apply an accessibility color theme to your Windows desktop, it actually can detect that from Power BI desktop and will adjust the color to be compliant with that. So I've just done an example here of choosing a specific theme, and then I can go through and change it as well if I'd like. And then we'll see it will follow through and also be detected in the Power BI desktop as well, which I thought was really cool, actually. And next, just moving on to my accessibility checklist. So to be honest, I was trying to think about how could I make this something people can take away and something that actually could be useful for businesses wanting to start being accessible. And I thought a really interesting way to start doing this would be make a form. So this is actually a quiz, and each point has like a number value associated with it. So let's say a report team now has a report they're ready to publish or ready to send to their users. If they filled out this form, they'd get a score at the end, and this could almost be your accessibility score of I know I'm 60% accessible, 80% accessible, and it can almost become maybe that standard in the business where we're not going to publish a report that isn't 80% accessible. So I was just trying to think how could this be like a simple way to start get going with things, and so all I've done here, it'll be available in the slides when they're out after as well, but all I've done here is gone through and said, what are the fundamental parts of accessibility? So color contrast, is it compliant? Have you used alt text? Are the visual interactions been set properly? And some things are really actually quite simple as well, just like silly things like the videos, making sure it doesn't start straight away when you open the screen. That's an accessibility feature. So it really is easy just to do a few things, and I think we don't always realize the impact that can make on someone else's life as well. So I thought it was a nice way just to get started with accessibility. And now we're going to look at consuming accessibility reports with accessibility tools. So I've got a sample dashboard here, and to begin with, I'm just going to go through the actual view data table option that you're probably all quite familiar with. But something I actually didn't realize is that when we go on view data table, sorry, actually going to go through contrast modes first, little mix it up, sorry. So actually when you publish a report to Power BI, it automatically is able to adjust it to a color-friendly theme using these different contrast modes. And I actually think a really important point here to highlight is that we can already tell that a lot of this isn't color compliant now, because this map visual, we can't actually get information from it. So already we can see how accessibility can make a big difference in someone's life. So a little small thing as well to get started with. And let's go to next. There we go. Now we're going to go on to data tables. So when you go on view data table, this actually isn't a screen reader accessible data table. What you can actually do instead is use Alt-Shift F11, and the table that now comes up has broken down that matrix, and that is now accessible for a screen reader. And those little kind of shortcuts and things like that, again, can make massive differences to someone's life about how they're understanding the information that they're being shown. So partly is about making these things known as well, and how can we, as report designers, be channeling this out and championing that there are other options available for people. There we go. And next, I'm just going to go on to focus mode, which I think we're probably all fairly familiar with. But just to highlight here for an example, let's say we've got our map visual. If you can't really see any of those smaller states or what's going on, you can make it larger, make it more interesting, and get a bit more information from it. And then next, now I'm just going to go through what it would be like for someone who is a keyboard user only and how they would navigate this page. So I've got on the right-hand side the steps that I'm doing, but Control F6 is what lets you first get onto your report area. And then we can see that I'm moving through there, using the different tabs to go through the different visuals and things like that. And when I find the visual I want to get into, all I have to do is press Enter, and then I can go through the different levels of hierarchy within visuals as well. And really interesting that I can also even filter the page by pressing Enter as well. So that'll filter the whole page for me as well. Enter to deselect the visual or the data point. And I can also select multiple data points as well by clicking on the legend series. So I thought that was really cool as well. So you can get multiple things at once. Enter again to clear that filter. And then next, the keyboard shortcuts. Like I mentioned, I've gone through a few of them that you can use, but there are extensive more lists on documentation going through things like table navigation, matrix navigation, and page navigation. And when you're in desktop view or on the Power BI service, if you do Shift ? It'll pop up with the most used keyboard shortcuts as well. So it's a really quick and easy way just to see some quick accessible things that you can start using as well. And then just to round off, so what the key takeaways I wanted from the session to be were. So accessibility is something that affects everyone. So like I was saying, if we just do an accessible design for one person, it's going to help everyone using that. We can see with the color contrasts, even having those data labels, it just made it easier for all of us to understand what that visual was showing. So it's something that we can all take away and get benefit from. There's really simple design choice that we can make to start using it. That's like I was saying, more extensive color ranges, things like that. It's not difficult just to start making these little steps to be more accessible. And there already are built-in features to Power BI that we can start using and start getting going with as well. So they're out of the box, ready to move, and ready to go. And also, it's a learning process where small changes can impact someone's life massively. So like I said, just setting alt text in certain things can really help someone who has to use a report and get the information out of it they need. So small changes to us can really mean big changes for other people. And yeah, that was my session for today. Thank you everyone for coming. I'd really appreciate if anyone could fill out the feedback form for me. I'm still an early speaker and still trying to learn in Power BI, so any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.